change things, right? Everything happened for a reason.
It's quite a niche interest. I couldn't find much on the internet related to this subgenre, so I thought I would make a video about it. It's something to do, you know. These films have interesting concepts and big ideas without the focus being purely on special effects or big name stars. Maybe it's also the fact that those who work in these low budget genre movies tend to be young filmmakers, so they're full of energy and ideas and they're interested in pushing these kinds of challenging concepts. Maybe it's because they haven't yet been burned by the industry or have had major failures, so they're not yet full of grievances and disenchantment. Obviously, that's going to change. But in the work of the best young directors, you find that kind of inspired enthusiasm. So number 5 will be Time Lapse, directed by Bradley King, who apparently previously made a short film about a time-traveling car, which I must search out.
This is just a start. Just smile and say goodbye to your day jobs, guys.
This movie focuses on a couple living in a small apartment with the guy's best friend, which fundamentally is a bad idea, so tensions are already high. They discover the charred body of their neighbour, and in his room they find a strange machine. It's a kind of camera. Unfortunately, it looks like something from a kid's TV show, like you're going to stand there and hope jelly beans are going to fall out of it. They eventually discover that it takes a picture of their living room at 8 p.m. every night. The developed photo shows the living room as it will be 24 hours in the future. The plot then develops from how they use the camera. Will they work together or will they kill each other? It's the eternal question. This idea has apparently been used before in other films, and there's an episode of The Twilight Zone which is very similar. But isn't there an episode of The Twilight Zone for every conceivable scenario? Rod Serling is always there, smoking, wearing a suit, looming over the audience. In Time Lapse, I like the idea of the photo, or the camera I should say. It's quite artsy and creates a good focal point for all the tension to build and the plot to develop.
What'd you get?
Number 4 is Safety Not Guaranteed, which is a kind of indie time travel romp, and it's very entertaining.
Do you sell guns here?
Aubrey Plaza is kind of good in it, overachieving and conceited as usual, doing that slightly bored, unimpressed, smart girl act. Jewish guys love her. I don't know why. I think she's Portuguese.
My calibrations are flipping pinpoint, okay?
Mark Duplass is great, creepy, obsessive, unbelievable. The Duplass brothers are so impressive in what they've achieved in independent cinema. They've made such entertaining, funny, original films on small budgets.
Alright, give me the lesbian and the Indian and I got a story.
Jake Johnson is very handsome, but not too handsome. Still relatable, like Bruce Springsteen on Born to Run. Jake is always charming, slightly obnoxious, boozy, charismatic, lovable. Something a lot of men try to do and very few actually succeed at. This movie is fun, adventure, rom-com, time travel. It's good. Number 3 is Time Crimes, where you have this Maori guy, probably in his early middle age, living a pleasant, if uninspired life, which is something that we all aspire to, really. He's in his garden and he spies some improbably beautiful young woman who's undressing. So, of course, he follows her and ends up in some kind of scientific research compound. And yes, this is where the trouble starts. So there's a mix of influences here. You have the unabashed Southern European sensuality, and there's also the lure of the cult, which promises sex and science and revelation. The set with the time travel machinery is maybe a bit cheap looking. It's more retro-futuristic. It's a bit like the Krypton factor. But I really like the main Time Crimes aesthetic. This kind of dark man pastel look. The film has a clever script that effectively expands upon the paradoxes of time travel. It's one of those clever little films where you try to straighten out the narrative thread, but you just end up staring into space and tilting your head, stretching. overall, it's a really well crafted little thriller that builds tension from the start.
Does everyone else still not have service?
I didn't even check.
Nothing.
I got 0.
It's weird.
Number 2, Coherence, which is not strictly a time travel film. It's more about time bending and parallel universes, but I think it still fits in with this list, and I really wanted to cover it, so that's why I'm doing it. With a budget of only $50,000, minimal sets, improvised dialogue, and it still manages to be really effective in terms of visuals and tension. It starts with a dinner party of maybe 4 couples, mostly insufferable, indulgent media types, with none of them being that charming or likable, you know. It's just like real life, and the acting is really good. The film takes its time establishing the characters and the latent or simmering tensions between them, kind of rivalries that are there. You know, who's cheated on who's drinking too much, who's being a bit too ribald, who's addicted to painkillers, who's taking horse tranquilizers to get through the evening, who has to take speed to go to sleep, you know, the usual things. So they're there to have dinner, but also to go out and look at a passing comet. It's Miller's Comet. So we learn that the comet's previous appearances are associated with a variety of strange goings-on and unexplained events.
After it passed, they would get lost. They would end up in the wrong home. They wouldn't really know where they were. This one woman called the police and said that the man in my house is not my husband.
It's that's quite intriguing. So tensions continue to build, eventually developing into a kind of paranoid, aggressive, trust no one atmosphere evocative of John Carpenter's The Thing. Nicholas Brendon is in this movie. He's very effective, unbelievable as this obnoxious, damaged TV star. It's a really good performance, and obviously Brendon, who was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer famously. But I'm not sure how self-conscious the decision to cast him was, but it obviously reflects Brendon's own career and his personal problems, as this character has a drinking problem. So it reflects Brendon's his own struggles with alcoholism and abuse of various pharmaceuticals, which he says was a coping mechanism for depression, anxiety, and deep-seated anger issues. So, you know, drinking cocktails made out of whiskey and sleeping pills and then trashing your hotel room, that's not admirable. But Brendon has been quite vocal about his problems, which is quite admirable, I think.
Darren, I can imagine no way in which this thing would be considered anywhere remotely close to safe. Why not the lottery? You have a margin account, right?
Primer is the earliest film on this list, released in 2004, written, directed and starring Shane Carruth. I don't know how to pronounce his name. This film had a very small budget, but I think it's the best of all of them. It's the uncompromised vision of one slightly obsessive individual, but I suppose you need to be that way if you want to make a lot of things, maybe especially a film. It's got great cinematography. Carruth sets the action in and around these lackluster environments like tract housing, industrial estates, and car parks. But like the Time Machine itself, everything is drab but inspired, kind of magic. He manages to make these banal locations feel otherworldly or kind of dreamlike. And there's even a bit of magic from the Time Machine itself. The characters, the kind of protagonists, have biblical names, Aaron and Abraham. I think that's right. They dress in cheap white shirts, ties, and black slacks. This, coupled with the slightly austere aesthetic of the film, make it feel like it's the Mormons or the Quakers have discovered time travel. Some of the dialogue is technical, convoluted, and difficult to understand, but so is complex science and the concept of time travel itself. So the director doesn't pander to or patronize the audience, which is great. Like some of the other films on this list, this one's very thought-provoking. You'll be trying to work it out, but you can also just enjoy it as a thriller without kind of confusing yourself or trying to solve the puzzle. So this one's great.